Saskatchewan farm boy, so I was born and raised on the farm. And I ended up making a decision that I was going to join the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. I ended up job coaching university students, and it ended up that relationship morphed itself into a mentoring relationship. I'm the author of 3 books. I'm an international best-selling author.
Welcome, everyone, to the One Moment Podcast. My name is Kevin, and we have a phenomenal guest on today's show. So listen, I want to start us off because we were talking a little bit before the show. We're going to be talking about some stuff that potentially could be triggering for some people. If you are triggered, do know that there is help available. If you live in Canada, the United States, or any of the territories where the following 2 numbers is available for your area, please dial them. It is 988 for the National Suicide and Crisis Hotline. It is also the 911 for the emergency number. Now, if you don't have access to a phone or any type of internet, so you can Google or you can access the website to the National Suicide and Crisis Hotline. There are other resources too, such as a local emergency department and or a local crisis center. Not all areas have a local crisis center. A lot of areas do. Also, depending on what type of help you need, you also have the National Domestic Violence Hotline, and you also have the National Sexual Abuse Hotline. Definitely use your resources if you need help in the event of anything. Our goal here on the One Moment Podcast is to help spread awareness of mental health, substance use, suicide prevention, suicide awareness, and to help create change where change is needed. I'm not going to tell any of this young man's story because I don't want to spoil the surprise, but he is the author of 3 books. He is I'm gonna tell a little bit, just a little bit. He is a former law enforcement in Canada, and he also does a lot of work with the mental health population. He's also a mentor to many folks. I'm gonna let him tell his story, kind of a little bit about him, and then we're going to see where this thing goes. I am looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to seeing this conversation because I'm still blown away by his experience. But without further ado, Mr. Doug Lawrence.
Well, thank you so much, Kevin, for the great introduction. And I too, based on our conversation before the show started, I too am looking forward to seeing where we end up going with the conversation and that. So, but first, let me just give a Reader's Digest version. So a couple things that I didn't mention before, but Saskatchewan farm boy. So I was born and raised on the farm, and I ended up making a decision that I was going to join the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and become a police officer shortly after graduating from high school. So joined the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, got bounced all over the place, transferred in a number of different locations, and some I was required to police a community by myself. I had no backup or support. In fact, when I was stationed in the Eastern Arctic, my closest backup was by aircraft, and it was 30 minutes by aircraft before I could get anyone to come and help. So that gave me lots of insight into how to manage people and deal with that. It was after we left the North that I ended up job coaching university students, and it ended up that relationship morphed itself into a mentoring relationship, which then kind of grew legs of its own. And we ended up, as a result of the work I was doing with the college and university students to help them through job coaching, they suggested that what I should do is do this as a living, but they were more inclined to look at it from the aspect of because the relationships were morphing themselves from job coaching and that to it became a mentoring relationship. And as a result of that, it caused me to do more research. It ended up, I did some research around mentor certification and actually ended up creating a certification process for mentors. And So as a result of that, I accumulated about 3,400 hours of mentoring over the course of my mentoring career. And I'm still doing it today, both internationally and within Canada. So I've also taught uh, about 20 some odd people in United Arab Emirates, uh, took them through the certification process and stuff like that. So did that. As you mentioned, I'm the author of 3 books. I'm an international best-selling author. I always keep a couple things back. I don't give you the whole deal. So international best-selling author, and I have done quite a bit of research on the mental health and grief because I lost my wife to cancer in 2021. So that's been kind of added to my juggling routine that I do with all the stuff that's going on.
Did not know international best-selling. That is amazing. That is awesome.
Thank
And
you.
wow, like, so when you talk about grief, we were talking briefly prior to the episode. I'd like to get your thoughts on the stages of grief. I know we briefly spoke about that. And the reason I ask, okay, this is just for the audience. I know, so it's going to be a repeat for what we were talking about before. There's so many healthcare professionals that's always pushing out the stages of grief. Like it's just this huge flood of the stages of grief. And I disagree with flooding with the stages of grief to helping people get through grief. What are your thoughts? What has been your experience?
I agree 100% with what you're saying and what we kind of talked about before the show started. Um, I know that when I'm talking to people about grief, and I always tell them that number one, grief is a very unique animal by itself. It's something that, if I'm grieving, I'm going to grieve my way, the way that helps me the best. But it may be totally different from how you go about grieving as well. And the thing that people, that our listening audience need to be aware of is that with grief, you don't go stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. You go where you need to go. And there's no definitive pathway to follow in order to get to the end. And oh, by the way, when you get to the end, there is no end because, that reminds me of a conversation I had with a chap. I was through a networking group that I had belonged to, and he had lost his son, and I forget what the cause was, but it was 12 years ago, and he said, there isn't a day goes by that I'm not expressing some form of grief because of the loss of my son over 12 years ago. And he said, I can honestly tell you as well that our journey, our healing journey, it's still going on, but we're still hopping from different, call it stages if you want, but different steps as we go through. We're still hop, skipping, and jumping through that. And nothing has really changed a lot.
I'm glad that you shared because it's a subjective experience, personal journey, and it's not for me to sit there and tell you how long you should grieve. They got this new thing now where they're saying, oh, that you shouldn't grieve for this, that, and the third length of time. And it's like, yeah, no, like who comes up with this, right? Like, yeah, I. Scary. It is scary.
And the thing that we don't realize is we're not doing anyone any favors by, suggesting that there's a pathway to follow and you shall follow it. And because I sit back and I ask myself, I wonder what would happen if I went from stage 1 to stage 5 and I missed all those other ones in between. What would happen? And, there's really no answer to that other than, you just let grief flow and you need to flow with it, and you need to be able to identify things that have triggered the outpouring of your grief, so that you can be cognizant. Like shortly after Deborah died, I couldn't drive past the hospital where she passed away at, because that would trigger all kinds of memories. And so, what's my coping mechanism? How am I going to deal with that? And, what I ended up doing was I avoided going to that direction for a period of time. And then I also went through some professional therapy as well, where we did EMDR and induced after death communication and a couple others that helped me break down what I was feeling and how I was dealing with it. But it helped me break it down so that we were in a position where we could better handle it.
I'm glad you shared that, because it is about processing it. It's about getting into the solution, allowing yourself to go through that experience. I'm curious, because you do some work in the mental health or within the mental health community. What got you or pushed you to being in the mental health community, like doing the work that you do?
I think the big thing for me was what kind of guided me or pushed me in that direction was, number one, the what I went through, the trauma and that I dealt with while I was in the police force. That was, there was that part. And then conversations with colleagues who said, you need to, well, the initial suggestion was, you need to write a book about this and how to better deal with it. So that's when I wrote You Are Not Alone, uh, and with the focus being on mentoring being part of the support structure for mental health. But the big thing for me that was the fact that when I looked around me and was reaching out and looking for help, guidance, whatever I could get my hands on, I ended up, there was this huge void, this gap. And so I needed to be able to do something, because I'm the sort of person that I care about individuals, and there's a gap. And so my gift, my calling, if you want to use that term, my calling was to be able to provide help to others who were struggling with mental health, grief, all of those things, drug abuse, you name it. I felt there was a place for me, Doug Lawrence, to be able to bring some value to the picture and to be able to help individuals who were struggling with their healing journey.
I do appreciate that. I think that's one of the reasons why we started this podcast, is because I have seen too many times a count where, and I'm not going to knock religion, I'm not knocking any type of anybody's beliefs, but I've heard many folks say, well, if they only had this, if they only had Jesus, or if they had this, or if they had that, they wouldn't have the mental health problems they have. And so I asked somebody one day, and this literally sticks out. I'm like, help me understand real quick. I said, do you believe in schizophrenia? And they said, no. They have a demon inside of them, and if they get that demon out, they're not going to have schizophrenia anymore. And I'm like, noted to understood. That's one of the things that drove us to do this thing, because there's a huge stigma. People need help. People need mentoring. We need more folks, more understanding around mental health. And when I say mental health, I mean the whole field: substance use, suicide prevention, all of it. Do you feel like the lack of resources there when you were a law enforcement officer, do you feel like that really propelled you to create and to assist and advocate and mentor?
Yeah, I would say that most definitely, because, like some of the experiences that I had, with the one, I tell the story all the time because it still grabs my heart, of a young lad. I was stationed in a northern community. There was only two of us as police officers there, and long story short, we were getting ready to go down the highway to the neighboring community for a wintertime hockey game. We were going to take them on, and we are going to kick some butt. So we ended up. He was just a young lad. He got selected to be on the team, and so he goes to go home to tell mom and dad, look what I made the men's hockey team. I'm going to play and all this stuff. And he was super pumped. He was ready to rock and roll. And he gets home and he opens the door, walks in, and finds mom and dad are just absolutely inebriated beyond any imagination. And so as a result of that, he ended up death by suicide. And so then there we are. We're in this rural, remote community where, we're 8 hours by vehicle away to the closest hospital where the closest morgue is. And so I'm the junior man on the totem pole. There's only two of us. So I drew the short straw to take his body out to the morgue. And part of what had taken place was that my soon-to-be wife Deborah ended up getting the tap on the shoulder to go with me because they didn't want to send me on the road trip by myself. So she ended up coming with me, and that's a whole nother set of experiences that you kind of have to wonder sometimes the things that we do. But how I coped with that was, at the time, I just, I tried to stay strong and tried to stay true because, here's my future wife to be, and I'm exposing her to something that is traumatic, because there's not many people that I know that would have gone through that sort of experience. And so we come back home after we overnighted and we drove back the next day. And my way of coping was to go to my liquor cabinet, haul out a bottle of Scotch whiskey, take the top off, throw it in the garbage, and drink the bottle of Scotch until I thought I had solved all the problems in the world. And it was around that time where, using that as my coping mechanism, and then also seeing the bad behavior that would follow as a result of that, I at that time made a decision that I was going to try and find other coping mechanisms to be able to deal with that. And it was a struggle. Let me put it that way. It was a struggle, and having to figure out how, okay, that didn't work well. So now what am I going to do? Because there wasn't a support structure in place. There was none of the support structures that we have in place today didn't exist. And one of the things I always talk to people about is that you need to come out of the closet, extend your hand, reach out and say, I need help, and somebody will be there to help you. Today, they will be. Back then, you were probably, talking to a wall for that matter, but reach out and ask for help. And there will be someone there that will help you. And it's okay to ask for help.
Absolutely. I definitely will second that. So, educational question here, if you can tell us, when you were in that moment, you didn't have any of the systemic structures that a lot of places have today. My question is, like, post your experience, fast forward to today, 2025, has there been any type of systemic changes where they have like EAP? I know here in the US we call it EAP. I don't know about in Canada, but do they have like those structural systems there?
They have somewhat. There is still this huge gap that exists where people still will try to reach out and ask for help, and there's no one there that's going to be able to help them. So it's still there. I remember I talked to a counselor who was dealing with or working with a young police officer in an isolated community in northern Saskatchewan. And the police officer said that when they go out on calls and there's trauma involved, there is no debrief that takes place. They they gather it all up inside of them, let it bubble and boil, and there's nothing else that gets done. What that police officer was saying is, I'm reaching out, but there's no one there to help. And that has to change.
Yeah, no, it does. Do you feel like across the board in all of Canada, there are still significant gaps within?
Yes.
Okay.
I was just going to say that we try, but sometimes trying isn't good enough. Sometimes trying is, you have to be, okay, that's the best, I guess, the best we can do, and let's try to make the best of whatever it is. But the big thing that we need to be mindful of is that it's all about listening and hearing. I need to be able to listen and hear what people are saying. I need to be able to listen and hear what individuals are, when they're dealing with, their healing journey and they're struggling. I need to be able to listen and hear what it is that they're saying, because inside of that message are some clues that I can take away and have that as part of how I'm going to help somebody with their healing journey.
I think listening is really key there. And I'd like to kind of throw this out there. This is for anybody who's listening. We have a right to be heard. We have a right to be listened to when it comes to our healthcare, when it comes to our mental health. Too often, we have folks who try to explain things to their providers, and I say providers, meaning therapists as well, but they're not heard. And so you're entitled. You have a right to a second opinion on anything related to your healthcare. Please utilize your resources. Speak up for yourself. You are your biggest advocate. That's why I asked Doug about all of Canada as a whole, not just in that one area as far as today's times. That is a huge gap. A very huge gap, whether it be in the US, whether it be in Canada, across the board. This is any country, any area of this planet. People need to be heard. People need to be taken care of. More often than not, we just jump straight to prescribing medicine. What if you just need to be heard and it's not just something a prescription will fix? So that is my encouragement. I hope you're hearing the stuff that we are talking about. This is my encouragement. This is my motivation for anybody who's listening. So getting back to you, Doug, with the significant gaps to barriers and stuff like that, you said that you're a mentor. You've helped people in, I think you said, I'm going to mess that country up. It starts with an E.
Emirates.
Thank you. Thank you.
Not a problem.
So with these significant gaps that Canada has, that we have in the US, I mean, just across the board, right? I mean, and we can go into the weeds with the gaps, but if you want to, you can go there. My question to you is, and this is more for the audience, so if anybody wants to get you as a mentor, whether it be an individual, organization, or what have you, where do you fall at on trying to be a part of that solution?
When I typically, so to be part of that solution, I come at it from and you can do this a couple different ways, but the main focus is a grief mentor. So somebody that can work with people that are, going through the grieving process. And how I go about doing that is I use mentoring processes and concepts to be able to, number one is what we were talking about earlier. So how listening and hearing is so important. And so part of being a great mentor is that you have to be able to listen and hear very, at a different level than a lot of people. And you have to be able to be non-judgmental. So whatever is said to you, or, you discussed as a group, it stays as that group, and nobody gets to say, well, you're silly for thinking that, or, stuff like that. There's no place for any of that. So the mentoring process, and what I found is that we can start the journey off simply by just by mentoring. And then, probably my best example is that I was asked to mentor this young lady who was starting a new business in a small community and stuff like that. And we had our first meeting, and it was virtual. So obviously with me being where I am and she being where, so it was virtual. And what I did was, which I always recommend to people, is that I shared with her some of the things that I've dealt with and some of the things that I'm still dealing with. And some of those were, mental health relatable experiences. And as a result of me opening up and sharing that with her, she turns around and says, you can sort of see the wheels processing. Well, if he's comfortable sharing, I'm going to share too. And so she ends up letting me know that, she's been diagnosed with 4 different challenges and she's dealing with them. And she hoped that that was going to be something we could talk about in her mentoring sessions, and which it was, so that, that tying the mentoring to the mental health piece, it's a natural progression.
Mental health is attached to everything, whether it be medical diagnoses, whether it be life coaching, whether it be any type of thing that's going on. It could be even just everyday stress. So no, I'm glad that you and she were able to go through that and have that experience together. Things that I typically try to do is, and this is what I try to help the people I supervise to understand, is in North Carolina only, I can't speak for any other state or Canada or whatever, but in North Carolina, if you are a licensed clinical addiction specialist through the Substance Use Board in North Carolina, our state regs allow you to, as long as there is a substance use diagnosis, you can work with that mental health piece. And so I help people understand that, because a lot of times people are trained, I'm not going to say inaccurately or inappropriately or inadequately, but we get this idea somehow, some way that, well, they have a mental health diagnosis, I can't touch that. Yeah, no, you can. And so I'm glad that our regulations are written that way, because whether you're mentoring, life coaching, whether you're helping people open a business or what have you, to do it successfully, and I say successfully, I mean like qualitatively too, it is about taking a biopsychosocial approach, a whole person approach. And I share that because this has also been my experience with my supervisors. They have said, Kev, I need you to tell me everything. I need you to be straight with me, and I need to know what's going on in your life. If you have any court dates, like, it doesn't matter if you get a speeding ticket, I need to know, because the more I know about you, the better able I am to help you out. And so it sounds like you kind of take a very similar approach to mentoring and then trying to help people out. Would I be correct in that?
Yeah, definitely. It's all about personal and professional growth. So I can't help you deal with the professional challenges that you have if we haven't looked at or haven't dealt with your personal challenges. And that can be a number, that can be self-esteem, self-awareness, self-worth, all of, as I call them, all the selves. If we can't get those as an example, if we can't get that house in order, then we're going to be pushing the cart uphill to deal with your professional growth.
I love what you just said and how you said it. We had a lady on our show. This was probably 2 months ago now. Her name is Elisa, and I can't even pronounce her last name. I'm not even going to try it, because it will be, man, I got nothing but respect and love for that young lady. She is a mental health therapist in the state of Florida, or Flow Rider, as I like to say. And she had mentioned somewhere in that recording, you can't put a new structure where old structure is sitting. You have to tear the old structure down in order to build a new house or build a new structure. And so what you just said reminded me of what she said. And it's true, because if I'm constantly thinking about I am unworthy, I am a piece of, add to that list, right? I'm gonna keep it clean today. If we're having these negative self messages, that impacts our self-esteem, our self-motivation, our intrinsic internal motivations. That impacts our relationships with one another. That impacts every aspect of our lives. And so we have to learn how to cope with that or deal with that. That means, as you said, we have to build this new house. We can't just put some plywood up and think everything's going to be all fine, good, and dandy. That might work temporarily.
Until the first storm comes along, and there it goes.
Absolutely. I'm ecstatic that you brought that up. So, out of curiosity, if confidentiality fits here, just let me know confidentiality is not an issue here. In your mentoring experience, what do you find to be the most challenging?
For me, the most challenging thing when I'm dealing with people is the whole personal growth. And what, it's a lot of times if we can address the personal growth challenges, then I think we're in a better place to be able to deal with the other stuff. And it can be good example was I got referred to a young lady that couldn't get a job. She'd float all these resumes out and all of that, and it just wouldn't go anywhere. And she ended up being referred to me. And as soon as I met her, I knew just her body language told the whole story. And it was, here's a young person who's struggling with lack of self-esteem, self-confidence. We've got to address that first before we do anything else job-wise. I knew that her resume was full of negativity. You pick it up, and I always jokingly say I pick up this piece of paper and I got to drop it because it's all this negative energy stuff that's going on. And so we went through the process. One of my techniques, especially dealing with that sort of stuff, is take yellow Post-it notes and write positive statements on them and stick them to the bathroom mirror. And every morning when you get up and you look at that, you read 2 or 3 of those messages, and eventually you'll get a shift will start to take place where you'll start to believe in who you are as a person, and you'll believe in the fact that you can do good work, you can do good things. And eventually, and in her case, what ended up happening was complete rewrite of her resume, positive energy. Ends up she gets 3 interviews in 2 weeks, gets hired, gets transferred to headquarters in Toronto, Ontario. I feel sorry for her for that, but that's okay. She ends up, she stays in touch with me, but she's had probably 2 or 3 advancements that have taken place ever since we worked together. And so, there are things that you can sort of see what can happen if we deal with the personal growth stuff first.
Does anyone else have that one tool that makes building a website a breeze? In an era driven by digital change, WebHash is the indispensable tool that holds the key to effortless website creation. Create websites that endure, defy censorship, and bypass any single point of failure. As cutting-edge technology redefines reality, seize the power to build beyond limits. Join the Web3 revolution now and forge paths others can only dream of. Visit our site today and build your legacy. Building my own space on the web was always a grind until I hit up WebHash. Their no-code builder is my ace. It's swift and solid. It's like rocking a digital fortress that's immune to the typical shutdowns. Level up your web presence without stress. Ready to stake your claim in the digital realm? Dive into WebHash today, connect your Web3 wallet, and get started. They have multiple subscription plans, from a free version to a lifetime subscription. Check them out today at webhash.com. Most importantly, they sponsor the One Moment podcast, helping to raise awareness to critical topics in the healthcare field. Our official website was built using the WebHash platform. Throughout the projects that the One Moment movement built on WebHash, they stood behind and supported it all the way. Sign up and start building your website today. Don't forget to visit onemoment.chain.box and subscribe to our social media channels.
It was interesting. You mentioned something about systemic boundaries being established through your life experiences. Once again, the One Moment podcast team has another custom designed episode for me, and I'm very thankful that you're here with us, Mr. Lawrence. So, being in corrections, I'm sure that you might know some professionals as well, but at the same time, they're diminished or pushed off to the side because they're not real law enforcement, right? So, imagine if your condition was worse because you have your own personal lieutenant at home. Anyways, yeah, it's difficult, but through an experience I had, I'm working through everything to get to the point of the me that I didn't understand or know of yet because my life was full of trauma. I thought I was doing well, and I became a correctional professional on my own, but now that's complicated now. Anyways, corrections, working on a mental health facility here in Colorado and running a restrictive housing unit in New Mexico for at least 5 years and developing myself into what's called a CERT operator. That was a major accomplishment milestone in my life. But at the same time, I didn't make the right decisions because I was living my life for other people instead of me, really. If disregarding as much as I accomplished, especially when I have my own personal lieutenant at home, and home is not really described as a perfect environment. So, anyways, I made some more bad decisions, but I'm working through it. And this podcast is part of it. I'm glad you're here today. Things happen, everything happens for a reason. And so I'm thankful that you're here with us, and thank you for your service in law enforcement.
I did 25. It sounds like a sentence. I did. I was in the Royal Canadian Mounted Police for 25 years.
Oh, that is extremely outstanding. I'm very grateful for that. I'm not sure how laws work in Canada, but I know the RCMP guys are like elite. So my hat definitely goes out
Thank
to
you.
you for that.
Yeah, thank you.
And I have been to Canada in a trip my wife and I took to Alaska. We went to Victoria, Canada, which is
Yeah.
over on the far west coast.
Yeah, Vancouver Island.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yep.
My wife was actually, she was born in Tofino, British Columbia, but she lived in Victoria for, I'm going to say, probably 15, 16 years.
Outstanding.
Former law enforcement professionals, what do you feel like is the gap between mental health, substance use, suicide prevention, or suicide awareness, and law enforcement officials? And what do you feel like needs to be done to bridge that gap so we can continue helping our law enforcement officers?
So I would say education. I would say that awareness. And I would say that part of the education piece is people like ourselves who have stories to tell. We need to be comfortable enough and we need to be supported to be able to tell those stories. And I think if we can get to that place, that's obviously a step in the right direction. And it's going to help fill that gap that that we've been talking about. It still exists even to today. But I think if we start to have those conversations, and maybe that's a fifth thing to add to that list, is actual conversations about this is what I'm feeling. This is, and going through that whole thing. So over to you, Trevor.
Well, my initial reaction and the first thing I thought of was proper training. And I say training because every year there's this prescribed amount of training that you must complete to be able to maintain the certifications of being acceptable for duty still, for your duties. So making it, especially with what you said, it's not just here in America, it's across the board at in every nation. So this is like a worldwide problem, not just in corrections, but in law enforcement. There has to be a connectivity or an ability for the person that is in duty to be able to understand the behavior that each individual might be going through. And that is a big task to properly understand behavior. So I can honestly say that even some of the natural stigmas within the specific departments and the corrections aspect of it, I can say anyways, the corrections department, people call them guards and babysitters and things like that. We're stigmatically pushed off to the side to the point there's a fear where actually law enforcement officers will not go into these facilities if they have their prescribed duty gear, and that's not allowable. And so for the ones that do those duties every day, they're specifically more advanced such because they interact more with these people that are incarcerated on their level. They have to, because they have to be able to read their behaviors, what's going on, so that they're not hurting themselves and they're not hurting others. If they are, then there are other procedures that they can use to get them some kind of proper care. So training is a very important part of it, and it might be something that would help to not diminish the person that has to take care of these individuals that are, a lot of them, permanently incarcerated. They will never get out of prison, but there are some that do have chances to. It depends. Once again, I have to go on the back burner of saying that you have to be able to assess behavior, and that is a skill. Sometimes it's an innate skill within each officer, but also if they're not familiar with it, then they do need to have the proper training and to be kept to a level that they know that they can perform it to the best of their ability. And that's a very general statement, especially when we're talking about a worldwide situation. But I've seen it. I've seen Russian corrections and law enforcement. I've seen just in Japan, China, law enforcement. It's a forceful thing, but it doesn't always have to be. I don't know. That might be an advanced level of law enforcement that I'm not familiar with, but that's okay. I know how to stop people from rioting, riot control. That's a big thing. So as long as you're not mandated that you hurt other people, there's a good way that you can not use force to positively influence them to make different decisions. That's pretty general. That's the best generality that I could possibly say about it.
I think you both are right on that one. And I think it really boils down to continued discussion about it, because as you and I made the reference earlier about, people saying that mental health isn't real, schizophrenia isn't real, this isn't real, that isn't real, substance use is a choice, substance use is this, substance use is that. I see all the time people knocking the LGBTQ community, and it's like, one of the things I try to encourage people to do clinically is take a non-judgmental perspective, right? Like, and look at people as people, not as throwing all these labels on and making a judgment on. Yeah, I can throw whatever label I want on somebody. Doesn't matter what it is. Does that make it right or wrong? What am I doing to the question I have to ask myself? And this is what I help, clients understand, especially in a group setting, because I'm more general there versus like one-on-one. What are we doing to build? What am I doing to bridge that gap between you and I that separates you and I? And it's not just you and I, right? Like, this is anybody, anything in my environment. And that's the way I try to work. So I definitely agree with what both of you are saying. It's not being afraid to have those conversations. One of the things that even myself, I personally experienced, I had a medication-induced suicide attempt, and I was afraid to talk about it because I'm a therapist. I'm this, that, and a third. I'm not law enforcement. I'm not anything of any other type of field. I shouldn't be thinking like that. I shouldn't have that type of activity. But what stopped me from talking about it for so long is because of fear of judgment, fear of this, fear of that. And so I've gotten to a point now, like, I feel comfortable talking about it because it's like, you know what? Oh, well, so what if you judge me? That's not my issue to struggle with. My goal is to help bridge gap, help talk about things, help spread awareness, as you both have just said. So I definitely appreciate both of y'all answering that question. This is my next question to the both of you. And you can answer, I guess I'm looking for, I don't know, law enforcement or systemic barrier or whatever. Do you feel like we have made significant progress? And I use that word significant strongly, because it's one thing to make progress, but it's one thing to make significant progress.
I think we're in between there someplace, is kind of how I see it. Is we have made some progress. Is it significant? That to me is a stretch. So I would, take us back to the question beforehand. I think if we put a number of variables into place, education, communication, training, all of those things, I think we can close that. But if we don't, if we just kind of let it kind of be the master of its own journey, I we're not going to get there.
I think I'd have to definitely agree with that. And just, we have to be cognitive of the realization that there is much more work to be done continuously. You have to maintain understanding to the best of your ability, given the parameters of maybe the law enforcement aspect of it, because you're actually enforcing the laws, you're not like writing them. And so mental health is very important, especially in some of the situations that law enforcement individuals encounter inside the facilities or outside the facilities. Yeah, some of the things that I've seen, don't want to even discuss those because they're so terrifying to normal thinking people that, oh my gosh, what, how why would I go into an environment like that unless I'm armed? That's like a law enforcement perspective. But then again, what like I said, in corrections, they're kind of pushed off to the side and dismissed as even being law enforcement, which is crazy to me because your beat and your path that you're walking every day is a duty. I don't know. I just know from my experience, there were some situations that I had to personally handle to help people stop hurting themselves, and it was excessive hurting themselves. And one person had to go to the hospital, and I had to talk him out of doing that. It was pretty intense. I'm not going to go into details of it, but yeah, it was a skill that I didn't even think that I had. Even with the training I had, it's kind of a connectivity between from human to human, as opposed to I'm the law enforcement, I'm going to stop you from doing whatever you're doing.
You know, what you just shared, Trevor, reminds me of what you were sharing earlier about your experience when you were in law enforcement. Wow. And it's so heartbreaking. It is so sad. And think about where we were at when y'all were law enforcement versus today. Not every organization has an EAP, right? Or something related to EAP. Not every organization has some type of crisis or trauma response system set up for when something happened. So, getting back to you, Mr. Doug, if you don't mind, you said you wrote 3 books. You told us about one of them. Tell us about the other 2.
The first one that I wrote is The Gift of Mentoring, and it was a accumulation of a whole bunch of blog articles that I had been writing about mentoring and, what is mentoring and how can you use it in a business context and a number of things. So self-published it and put it out there, very well received. And then I started to get into the research on mental health and how mentoring needs to be part of the support structure. And that was what spawned the book, You Are Not Alone, which is, as I mentioned earlier, Amazon #1 bestseller, bronze medal for the Global Book Awards. And so I had that. And then the next one that I wrote was Grief, the Silent Pandemic. And it's a book about grief. So understanding, our conversation earlier about the 7 steps, I dispel that myth in the book. It's a Amazon bestseller, and I'm just like I mentioned, I'm just waiting to hear. I think it's in late August whether or not I know I'm a finalist from a book award, but I'm not quite sure whereabouts yet. So, but I with Grief, the Silent Pandemic, was it that book? No, it was the other one. You Are Not Alone. Ended up this psychiatric nursing program. Actually, the management group, there was 20 of them. They were having a training retreat over, I think this was last summer, and they actually purchased a copy for each one of the management supervisors. So they recognized the value that it could actually bring too. So, yeah, so that's the three. And I'm supposed to be writing a fourth, but I don't know when I'm going to do that.
You're supposed to be writing a fourth one. So this is a teaser for everybody out there who is a reader of yours. What do you plan on it being about? Give us a little bit of a teaser now, if you can.
I will. I'll put a teaser out there, but don't hold me to it because the journey could change directions. So when we published Grief, the Silent Pandemic, I was asked by a number of individuals, so when are you going to start writing the next one? And, what's the title going to be? And what I had said, I just blurted it out at the time, was spirituality and mentoring, and just left it at that. So, because there is a place for both. So there is definitely a place for, part of mentoring, part of dealing with grief. There's also, one of your coping mechanisms can very well be spirituality.
I love it. Do know whenever you get it published, the day that it goes live or the day before it goes live, however you want to do it, more than welcome to have a live interview with us. 100%. Absolutely would love to do that with you. Because I think regardless of which direction it goes, spirituality, mentoring, grief, what have you, every topic we've spoken about today, even with law enforcement, doesn't matter which, you can pick one of them and you can write 100 books on them and you still not cover the whole gamut of experiences of either of them. But there needs to be more conversation of in everything we've spoken about. Man, we've covered a lot in just one short hour. I got a couple of questions for you, Dan, if you don't mind. They're the best questions that we always ask, and the best questions you'll probably be asked for today. If somebody wanted to get a hold of you, hire you as far as mentoring, mentor menteeship, things like that. Do you work with organizations primarily? Do you work with one-on-ones like you and I, if I wanted to have you as a mentor? How do they contact you? Those are two of my questions.
So the answer to the first is both. I do individuals and I also do organizations. So there's that part. So they can reach me on my website at www.talentc, so the word talent with C on the end, .ca, and go to the contact page and get a hold of me that way. They can also, if they subscribe to LinkedIn, I'm on LinkedIn quite a bit, so you can direct message me there if you wish. But probably the easiest way is to just send me an email message at doug.lawrence@talentc, so the word talent with the letter C on the end, .ca, and I'll get back to you right away.
As we just said, we've spoken about a lot. We've spoken about systemic barriers, systemic gaps. We've talked about ways to bridge gaps. We've talked about grief. We've spoken about a lot. If there is one thing you'd like for any individual who's watching this episode to take away, what is that you would hope they will take away?
That it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to extend your arm outside the closet and say, I need help, and there will be somebody there to help.
What is your call to action?
I would ask that each individual that's watching the show today, that you actually reach out and make the offer to someone to help them, to be of service to them. And if you can do that, the world's going to definitely be a better place to be.
Well, folks, you've heard it. Trevor, you've heard it. We've all talked about it. Continuing to break down barriers, continuing to build bridges. This is what we've been able to do today. And that's really what matters. It doesn't change in one night. It doesn't change in 1 minute or 1 moment, 1 hour, and in 1 week, 1 month. It takes each and every one of us to continue to break those barriers and build those bridges. And so I'd like to say officially, Mr. Doug, thank you for coming on and helping to build one more bridge across the board.
Feeling lost or alone, struggling with unbearable trauma or addiction. Every day feels heavier than the day before. The weight of unaddressed emotions and problems can leave you paralyzed. On the One Moment podcast, we are aligned with the vision and mission of The Place to Heal. Founded in Sanford, North Carolina, The Place to Heal is a growing multi-specialty mental health and substance use practice dedicated to facilitating healing and personal development. Our team of compassionate clinicians are committed to providing evidence-based therapeutic interventions tailored to each individual's unique journey. We are passionate about empowering our clients to overcome challenges and achieve emotional wellness. The Place to Heal hosts and sponsors the One Moment podcast. Visit onemoment.chain.box to learn more about our podcast and to be connected to The Place to Heal. Follow us on social media for more content